Oh, I guess I'll do an update on today's date in Texas was another tragic school shooting. And as of now, 10 kids or 10 people were killed in a high school close to, not far from where I live. Texas is big, but outside of Houston. I didn't really look a lot about every detail of it, but I just supposedly the young man stole his father's shotgun and a handgun. If that's true, it the last shooting I talked to someone that's very liberal and very strong against the whole argument that rages in the country. And of course, I'm not against the banning of assault weapons. I know some conservatives feel they're not for the banning of assault weapons, and their arguments are because they can kill with something else. A shotgun, which I had shotguns as a boy to hunt. And so I guess the argument from the conservative side or the right side of the aisle is to harden the schools, make the targets harder because uh, having more security, though there seemed to have been one school resource officer at this particular school. And so you're going to go back and forth. Some will use a shooting, and they will think that they're arguing from a perspective of wanting justice or righteousness, but they don't. Some will not realize that it's just become a tool to them, not even realizing it, to express hatred to one political side or to the other. I saw that in the DACA, the immigration thing, and I saw how some were so strong on the Democratic side of the aisle. And I said, oh, they're going to blow this on. They're going to blow it on purpose. This was the immigration debate, which they did, because it could have been a simple solution, meaning they could have had the agreement to have a law that allowed the young kids that had come in illegally. But as I saw the trend, I said, now, some were sincere, Luis Gutierrez and others, because they espoused what I said. I said, look, if it's your children and you're really, really concerned about those kids, you'd say, the heck with it, fund the wall. But some didn't want it. Now, in this debate, if it's true that the young man took legal weapons from his father, then the banning of every assault weapon would have made no difference at all. And you could say, but there are other laws we can institute. Look, I understand those things. Maybe we should look a little deeper. Today there were more people killed. It was a Cuban airliner that went down in Cuba, if I'm remembering right. But even if you had an airliner that went down in the United States, and I'm not, say if 100 people died today from an airliner, and then maybe we found out 3 months down the road that the pilot was suicidal, which has happened in some of these other infamous cases. All of that would be bad, wrong, and wicked. But it wouldn't, even though maybe 100 lives were lost by the crime of that pilot, it wouldn't have garnered the attention. One of the questions we should ask is if you do have a young person or whoever, and it plays into some people commit crimes like this because of the fame. That's sad, but that's because of the notoriety. And of course, the innocent 10 lives that were taken today were innocent lives. But the attention, nationwide and also worldwide, of the tragic deaths of 10 people at a high school, it's like the thing with the terrorism. They know if they kill someone with a vehicle, 2 or 3 people. But then we know he was a radical Islamist. That'll garner worldwide attention. It'll drive that news cycle for that day at least, because it was terrorism, which actually accomplishes the goal of the terrorist, is to get the attention. Though you'd have maybe a lady would run over her husband or something, things like that happen, which is still a crime still, but it doesn't garner the attention. We have to ask some of these other questions as well, because this shooting is going to play into both sides. And a big majority of what you will hear in the left-wing media, this is going to be fodder for the attack against the other side. And then the argument from the other side would be, if you had more, if you will, armed security in schools, which most on the left do not agree with, then you could have stopped a certain level. I think there's bigger questions we should ask. You know, I remember many years ago at the fire department, I had a Christian fire chief, Chief Torres. He was a charismatic Catholic, but he was a Christian. And just one day, and I was young still, you know, but somehow I remember there was a debate that happened about abortion or whatever it was. But somehow, I remember this, I said, you know, if we as a society, which we have deemed, if we as a society have made a decision that to teach commandments or morality in the schools is now wrong, why do we wonder when kids who grow up and spend a lot of their time in public schools, why do we wonder if they break moral law? Now, I phrased it a little bit different, I'm sure. But I was basically saying, as our society has evolved over time, we have said, and there are many arguments and court rulings, that to teach, to say to kids in a public setting, thou shalt not kill, is deemed wrong and pushing a religious moral view upon a child, which is now considered wrong in our country, meaning in a public school setting. And the root is saying it's wrong for us to teach you what is right and wrong. Now, understand there's big debates on all of these things. But as a society, we've got to a point where in the early stages of the country, it was okay to teach morality to children in schools. Now, some will say, on the left of the aisle, who are you or who is anybody to try to legislate morality? Though law itself, by definition, is, quote, the legislation of morality. A law that says you can go 70 or 40 is legislation of morality. Because if you do 50 and it says 40, or you do 80 and it says 70, you've basically broken a law. And so all law, at its root, natural moral law, is the legislation of morality. But yet many who are arguing, rightfully, that it's wrong to kill, also argue that it's wrong for us as a society to teach that to children in public schools. There were some cases. There was an illegal alien. This case came up, something I was reading, and he was arrested because he was not a citizen, and this is the only reason it came to my mind. It made it into news, and he had sex with like a 12 or 13-year-old girl. Now, I don't know the age of the legal alien, if he was from southern Mexico or Guatemala or where. But I remember in the case, they said, why did you have sex with this 12-year-old girl? Now, he might have been 18, I don't know his age. And he said, I didn't know that was illegal. I believe it's possible he actually did not know that when I just looked at that case. People know what's right and wrong when you teach them what's right and wrong. And if we have trended to a point where we say, to teach right and wrong is the imposition of your values upon others. And how dare you try to impose your values or morale, and yet the same people on that side of the aisle will also argue that society should never impose morality upon somebody else, not realizing that we do that all the time. It's just whose morality, which measuring run are you using? We could call this a short teaching on, it's called natural moral law, meaning the foundation of law. Courts and laws are not, even in our country, actually come right out of what we see in the Old Testament. The foundation of the Ten Commandments, the foundation of moral law. There are some things that are right and some things that are wrong. It used to be wrong to take the life of a child fully developed. That used to be wrong. Now, to me, it still is very wrong. But yet many will now say it is now right. It is now good, and it is now to be celebrated. Though it's never right, never good, never to be celebrated. So as I have not really, today I saw some of my friends who was going to do a little teaching. But of course, it's tragic what happened this day in Texas. And these things are going to happen again and again and again. And to both sides of the aisle, I'm not saying, I try to listen to, guns maybe shouldn't be as easily accessible, and I understand that argument. And then on the right side of the aisle it's actually not the law-abiding gun owners. And if criminals are going to go out and commit crimes, they're not really worried about following any particular gun legislation or law. So, look, I understand that. But what will happen this time will be the same exact thing that's happened last time. Which, in essence, if you are on the left side of the aisle, and you said, this is what we want, whatever it is, banning the AK, that would have made no difference here. But then we need tougher laws on the parents restricting the guy. Okay, I'm sure we have some on that. You're supposed to keep the... And if you pass them all, the sad truth is, because of our Constitution and amendments to it, Second Amendment, because of that, and because the courts have indeed ruled that it wasn't just speaking about a militia, the right to bear arms, but the courts have indeed ruled it has to do with individual gun owner rights, then you're never going to eliminate some person, some kid, whether it's a Dylan Roof or somebody else. I think they said this young boy in Texas also had a trench coat, who is now in custody. So if you recognize we can't eliminate all guns, and we can never eliminate a deranged person from getting a hold of one, but if he's looking for fame, infamy, then he knows how to get that. If he went into a FedEx building or wherever else and did this, it wouldn't have garnered what this school shooting garnered, that type of attention. Though there are many people that died even in this day by crimes, by tragedies, plane crashes. There are many others that died in this day in the streets of Chicago, wherever. But if one kid is looking for attention, or one radical Islamic terrorist is looking for attention, he can commit the same act, meaning run somebody over, knowing it's going to get the attention. knowing it's gonna run that news cycle. And it's gonna run that news cycle also because now in both sides, this is fuel. This is fuel. Just like the DACA. They didn't want to solve it. They did not want to solve it. It was fuel for something deeper. We'll get the side we hate. And so really it's really deeper. And you can listen, liberals will listen all day to the MSNBC. I don't even get MSNBC on my Roku system. They'll listen all day to that side and it will feed their view, which I'm not saying is totally wrong. And on the right side of the aisle, the same thing. Feed their view. And I don't really think there's an honest or sincere effort deep inside to want to really solve any of this. You say, are you telling me, John, I'm a liberal and I don't care that people die? No, I understand you care. John, I'm a conservative. No, I understand you care. But you know, if you had the perfect society, you know, I read the Bible every night. And Jesus, they were in Luke's gospel. There was a woman that was bowed down for 18 years. She was crippled, had an infirmity. And Jesus heals that woman in the synagogue on the Sabbath. He broke a religious rule, if you will. I can't do the whole thing here. And then the ruler of the synagogue, if you will, the pastor, after this woman had a miraculous healing, the ruler of the synagogue gave a little quick homily and said, there are 6 days where you can be healed. And if you want to come and be healed, come on those days, but not on the Sabbath. And what was the nice response of Jesus? Excuse me, Pastor. The first words, a red letter in the chapter of Luke. You hypocrite. You hypocrite. Which one of you, if you had an animal that fell in a ditch on the Sabbath, wouldn't take it out or give it water? And what about this woman who Satan has bound low these 18 years? How about I loose her? You don't even realize, you so-called sitting in the seat of authority, you have no idea what you're even talking about. You stood up there thinking you decreed something just, and he said, you're such a hypocrite. That was his answer. And it says, they were stunned and the people liked it. So there's something in man, even dressed in religious garb or whatever other type of thing we say, we're here to want what's right, to want what's good, but the nature of man is corrupt. Okay. So we'll just call this the school shooting.